sailors managed to rally Singaporeans from all walks of life, from different football perspectives, angles, even whether they are as fervent in local football or not, to back the team, to watch and believe in the team as one, the way the old Malaysia Cup fever used to. That glimpse of the past was present tonight. I just came back from watching the AFC Champions League 2 final held at Bishan Stadium, and I witnessed a valiant spirit, a committed fight from the Lion City Sailors despite going down agonizingly late into injury time, 1-2 in the final. Still, the Sailors should be lauded as they make history as the first ever Singaporean team to ever make an Asian club final. And they really warmed the hearts of a largely Singaporean crowd in the 9,787 in attendance at Bishan Stadium tonight. And it's a major credit to both the Lion City Sailors and also all the other government departments who helped to rebuild or rearrange Bishan Stadium into an overnight fortress for the Singapore League champions, Premier League champions, in their usual turf, with an added new dimension where football is brought very close to the local fans. And before I go a bit further into the analysis, it's really a personal gratitude to both club as well as Sport Singapore, the Asian Football Confederation, and other key partners for putting up such a showpiece event at quick notice, especially when they had to get everything ready just after the Singapore general elections that was held earlier this month. So now, looking onto the business on the football pitch, the Singapore champions fought really hard. They fought from the first minute to the final whistle. The players, no one can be faulted for anything. Every player, local, foreign, or even naturalized citizen, he gave his all, left nothing on the pitch, gave everything for the cause in front of an expectant huge crowd close to 10,000, and among them, majority or a substantial majority are probably watching the Lion City Sailors live for the first time, watching Singaporean club football live for the first time, never mind an Asian club competition live for the first time. And the spirit, the motivation in carrying the Singapore flag for such a grand occasion deserves to be lauded. And I'm personally heartened being at the scene, seated with my friends who are also watching live men's local club football for the first time along with their children. It heartens me that to be able to be sitting alongside my friends and watch, and also on occasion shout, and to be immersed into the occasion. I think what the Sailors did in their fascinating Asian club run is nothing short of miraculous, and is totally deserving of what they have done in setting this high benchmark in local football history. I admit, prior to that, it was only in 2004 where a Singaporean team, in fact two Singaporean clubs, last reached at the final stages of an Asian club competition, and they were Geylang United, now Geylang International, and Sailors' former name Home United. They both reached the finals of the first ever AFC Cup, which is now rebranded into this competition model. And having fought so hard to keep the final in Singapore after winning the East Zone following their deserved victory over Australian side Sydney FC, there was plenty of work to do. Off the pitch, they had to work very hard to get things ready at short notice. On the pitch, the sailors had to focus their minds towards the biggest showpiece of all time and taking on an Arab opponent in Singapore. The last time that happened, where a Singapore team competed against an Arab team from the Middle East in Asian club competition, was way back, I think really way back in 2008, when, if I'm not wrong, Singapore Armed Forces FC, later Warriors FC, they lost to an Omani club in the quarterfinals, and Tampines Rovers fell to Al Faisali or Shabak or Ordun of Jordan, also at the same stage. So still, what the sailors have done is not only unprecedented, it has brought them into very unfamiliar territory, and unfamiliar territory that no Singaporean club has ventured. Actually, my correction. And facing an Arab team in Singapore, that was in 2008. The last time a Singaporean club faced an Arab team in an Asian club competition, that was actually against an Iraqi club. Let me see. Way back in 2011 AFC Cup round of 16, where they lost 1-0, and despite only bringing 15 players to the northern part of Iraq, that required a lot of resources to get there in the first place. So it's in a way re-venturing back into old and unfamiliar territory for Singaporean clubs, and it gave a lot of work for the sailors to work on. And despite that, unfortunately, Alexander Rankovic was clearly outsmarted by his wily counterpart, Cosmin Olario of Romania, who has extensive experience coaching Arab teams in the Gulf, especially in the Emirates. So what Olario did with Sharjah FC was actually, in the first half, was to get his team to figure out what Lion City sailors were really like, because they have never played against any Southeast Asian team before. They have never mind the sailors. They are in unfamiliar terrain, in humid weather, even though they had a set of Bahraini referees on the pitch who speak a common tongue with them, and also having to be only in Singapore, adjusting to its humid weather for at least 4 days, around 4 days before the showpiece event. So for sailors, they probably had looked at all the previous tapes. They probably thought that their poor season form was going to be translated a little bit into the final. To an extent, they were right. But what the sailors, or never mind the Singapore champions, put in any other Singaporean club in their shoes, they will also struggle, because you can do all the data analysis and you can probably figure out this player has this weakness, or that team is vulnerable in certain set play or tactical formation. But what teams fail to comprehend, especially in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia, is you can analyze all we want, but once these two teams are out on the pitch, that's when reality really strikes very, very hard for Southeast Asian sides, never mind Singaporean club teams in the Asian club competition, because it's new terrain for the Arab teams, but they have a massive advantage over Southeast Asian clubs in terms of their foundational training, which is far superior compared to the native Southeast Asians. They will also had a lot of resources to build up their physical strength, to build up their technical capabilities, and also the tactical fundamentals needed to survive in Asian club football at the highest level. This is why the Middle East are particularly successful in Asia, even though they are miles away from South Korea, Japan, Iran, and to an extent Australia. But they dominate the middle tier, while Southeast Asia is probably the third tier or even the fourth tier for many of the clubs and national teams in this region. So you can see that there's a massive gap in the playing abilities and their ability to control the game and decide when they want to go for the kill. I think that was a massive difference between a committed, a determined performance from the Sailors, which ultimately was insufficient for the home team as they lost agonizingly after snatching a dramatic equalizer at the start of the 11 minutes of additional time. So it's quite obvious that the moment Sharjah were forced to up another gear, they found a way to do so, and that was something the Sailors failed to respond after that because they already hit their maximum. The Sailors have already hit their maximum, and this is already in such an incredible Asian Club 1 run where they were able to hold Sanfrecce Hiroshima to a 1-1 draw at home, never mind the overturning of the first league result, and also holding on to defeat Sydney on aggregate at the back of another solid 2-0 win in the first leg of the semi-finals, and also in other rounds where they used their home advantage to the maximum and utilise quality foreigners in their squad, because for the first time this season in Asian club competition we saw the likes of we saw that clubs are allowed to register an unlimited number of foreigners in their squad. Unlimited, yes. Probably there's also a small quota for locals, but there is an unlimited quota for import, so they can technically fill an all starting 11 who are not born from that nation. And in the Sailors' case, the majority in the starting 11 tonight are imports. Song Woo-young is a naturalized South Korean born Singaporean citizen. Then you have the players who have had experience in European club football, in the Eredivisie, in Bundesliga, in youth internationals, not the under 15s but in the under 21 levels, in Leonard T, Bart Ramsela and Maxim Lestian, and even Tony Dakovic. Then and Diogo Costa, Rui Perez. These are the guys who form the core alongside the local veterans in Izwan Mahmud, Haris Harun and Shawar Anwar, and with a decent supporting cast in Hami Shahin and Christopher Van Huysen, Lionel Tan, Abdul Razak, and who else? Because in the starting 11 today, only Izwan Mahmud, Haris Harun and Hami Shahin are the only local born Singaporeans in the starting 11. Throw in Song Woo-young, you have four Singaporeans in the starting 11, where the rest are all imports. And in the supporting bench cast, you have experienced former national player Hafiz Noor, Singapore's current top striker Shawar Anwar, Christopher Van Huysen, who is a solid left-footer wing-back, Lionel Tan, tall, no-nonsense defender, and Abdul Razak, young, decently promising with a lot of good physical attributes, but yet to have a proven goal-scoring record in the Singapore Premier League. So when you look at the local depth, especially those core players who feature quite regularly for the Sailors in both domestic and Asian club football, you do realize something that is quite worrying. Hami Shahin, Lionel Tan, Abdul Razak are the only 3 core Singaporeans who are under the age of 30. The remainder are over 30. Shawar Anwar is 34. Izwan Mahmud and Haris Harun, they are also 34 as well. Christopher Van Huysen is probably approaching 31, 32, if I'm not wrong. Then the rest, they are also probably approaching on the wrong side of the 20s or even hitting 30 already. So Hafiz now is already 31, 33, 34. But there is a very worrying trend. It's like these experienced Singaporeans are forming the core. Yes, even Song Wee Yong is already above 30. They form the core at the age of 30 and above. They are still the fulcrum of the Sailors squad alongside the imports. I mean, looking at this cup run itself, it's a good thing because they have the wealth of experience to bring the squad through all the way to the final and make history in the process. But beyond those three names I mentioned who are under 23, the rest of the under 30 players, the rest of the under 30 players in the Lion City Sailors squads are all very raw. They are not fully ready to endure the hustle and bustle of first team football, but yet at some point eventually they have to come in. And will they come in as well? I mean, they are promising young player Nathan Mao. Nathan Mao is currently doing national service, so he's out of the Sailors radar for now. He's probably under Young Lions, or probably if he's not at Young Lions, probably eventually will be with Safsa in the new under 21 league season. But apart from him, who else has impressed enough to make the cut? Nobody. Apart from these three names, Hamid Shaheen, he's already above 25. Abdul Razak, 23. Lionel Tan, I think he's also above 25, and is getting some decent game time at the back of the defense, and is a national team player. All these three players are also in the national team. So it does underline a rather beneath the surface there is a crisis that's, I think, reminiscent of what's happening in all the other Singapore League clubs, where those young players who are coming through now are really not good enough compared to their predecessors. And we are talking about potentially a much lower bar than what is already possibly a low bar. It's like it's getting worse. And without these imports, Sailors might not have gone as far as they would have liked. Let us be forthright about that. But still, getting the right imports is just as important. For their results actually provide a boost in the locals' perception of Singapore football. And the way the crowd responded to the Sailors throughout the 90 minutes and thereafter was largely positive, because to an extent it brought back, maybe to those who are not into the Malaysian Cup, they will not agree with me, but it brought back that memory of the Malaysian Cup, where like the national team of the past, where it's multiracial. The Sailors are also multiracial, not just in terms of your ethnic Chinese, Malay, Indian, but also the imports from different diverse nations, even heritage players. Abdul Razak, who is half Nigerian because of her parent, or Song Wee Yong, who is formerly South Korean born. They provide that variety, and it prevents any race from being dominant and taking control of the internal dressing room politics, which provides a great harmony and chemistry within the team. As from what I've seen in the Sailors video, or in the comment from one of the guys who have worked behind the scenes in the production of the Sailors videos or media production for their Asian club campaign this season, that unity is very essential to the Sailors' success. So having the rules right, having a stroke of luck in Sanfrecce Chase first leg being overturned helped, but that unity largely was pivotal in pushing them all the way to even nearly forcing extra time in the final tonight. So close, yet so far. Yet in spite of this, issues still remain. Our level, the Singaporean club football level overall, especially among the local bonds and even the half-bloods, are only at a mid-level at best, low mid-level to not so great lower level than their predecessors, the national teams of the more recent past. So it is a challenge that this Singapore Youth League has to do to raise up a new generation. The Sailors Academies, they have an immense job to do to ensure that they are able to bring forth a group crop of young players who are more than ready to play for the first team the moment they are called upon to action. To be ready to play, to be ready to contribute, and not just come on for the sake of the last few minutes of the game. I think this is something the Sailors Youth Department will definitely be looking on in all the positions, not just your outfield players but also in the goalkeeping department, to show that somebody is at least half as good as veteran goalkeeper Iswan Mahmud. Somebody can be half as good as Haris Harun, not just in leadership but also in providing a strong mentality, composure with the ball, organizing and rallying the troops, organizing tactically, half as good as Haris, or having that dexterous ability of Shawar Anwar, his ability to spring past the offside trap a lot more, to have a strong goal scoring record, whether it's with the foreigners providing assists or the locals, to be able to contribute. It's all these areas that Sailors have a lot to improve on, and Sharjah actually showed that their locals played a critical role because of their stronger foundations that allowed them to win. When they needed to step up a level, they still could. The Sailors unfortunately were done, and it's a massive pity because the Sailors had done a lot to put Singapore football back on the Asian map, even for that brief moment, to make Singaporeans feel very proud of this batch of Lion City Sailors, the way they do with the 1994 Malaysia Cup team. In Abasad, you read Maxim Lestian. In Bailey Wright, you read Zhang Jun. In Nazri Nasir, you can read Haris Harun. For David Lee, you read Izwan Mahmud. For Fandi Ahmad, I know you can't compare the legendary Fandi Ahmad. Or Stephen Tan Teng Chuan. You have Shawar Anwar. You got Christopher Manhuizen, who is dependable at left back, the way Saswa Di Mata Dasuki was, or even the Russian tank, the late Mohan Abu Sama. And these are the feelings that Singaporeans have been long waiting to evoke. Even the more silent majority local football watchers, those who attended the game, some of them were there when they sang the Ole Ole, including myself. You can feel Lion City Sailors succeeded in what many could not even the national team did, is to rally behind the nation, to make them feel that this is part of us. This Sailors team, with their experience, with their racial diversity, with the tactical know-how, with the unity, with the smarts that they had to reach all the way to the final, they gave a slight semblance of how the 1994 or even the 1993 Malaysia Cup team did, or even to an extent what Radi did with the beautiful compliments of or combination of young promising players then, like in Bahaki Kaizan, Ridwan Muhammad, Syaril Ishak, Khairul Amri, with your foreign born players in Daniel Bennett, Ekman Goncalves, Itimi Dixon, Agu Kasmir. Not the same level, but for a while there was a little bit of that. But the Sailors of today, they brought forth this swelling feeling of local pride. Even in defeat, they stood up high. They make Singaporeans feel that we have a football team we support, including myself. And it's a good sign. But as I've also said, there are fundamental weaknesses that still need to be created, because we cannot depend on every season to have that kind of good fortune that the Sailors had, where Sydney were a little bit out of form. They were poor in the league, and they really showed it even against Sailors in the first leg. Or Sanfrecce Hiroshima, who dominated us in the original 6-1 win, only to have it overturned due to an administrative error over an ineligible player. we cannot have, no, not every season is going to be as fortunate as this, but the real crux, not just for the Sailors but for every Singaporean professional league club, even the semi-professional club, is how do we build to ensure that the Singaporean clubs are able to build on the strong team fundamentals that will allow them to be more than competitive without needing that stroke of good fortune, to be more than ready to take on the mid-tier levels in Asia, not just in the East Zone but also against the West. How do we strengthen the football fundamentals of our budding young players of tomorrow with the coaching skills, with the coaching qualifications, with Kejayaan now back as the head of director under Unleash the Raw, how to get all the coaches on the same track to build a national pipeline where we will have higher standard local players who are more than capable of representing the Singapore flag on the international front. And it's not just in Southeast Asia in the ASEAN Championship, but also in the Asian Cup qualifying to finally qualify for the Asian Cup on merit, and perhaps even having a crack at the final round of World Cup qualifying the way Thailand, Vietnam and Indonesia have done. And how to build a system that will make local fans want to go back to watch local football, because they do finally feel like in tonight's game, the Sailors are part of us, were part of us tonight, and the fans felt it. The fans appreciated it. They were angry at the opponent for their play acting, which unfortunately is a typical Arabian trait, Arabian football trait, or even the refereeing in the first half was bad. It didn't matter that the Sailors managed to rally Singaporeans from all walks of life, from different football perspectives, angles, even whether they are as fervent in local football or not, to back the team, to watch and believe in the team as one, the way the old Malaysia Cup fever used to. That glimpse of the past was present tonight. That was the biggest takeaway, but fundamental corrections are still needed to make sure that this is not just a mere one-off, that maybe in 5 years from now, we do not want another 20-year gap before another Singaporean team reaches an Asian Club semi-final, never mind the final. We do not want that. We want maybe the next 5 years where we can have at least yet another Singaporean club in the Asian Club semi-finals before reaching the final on a more, or even reaching the AFC Champions League elites, the top tier club competition in Asia, reaching the quarterfinals, which is something we have never done, never mind the round of 16. These are things that clubs, academies and all the people involved, not just in the Sailors but everywhere in Singapore, the weaknesses that Sharjah exposed the Sailors on were fundamental weaknesses. That's why the Sailors lost. And these were the lessons that I think Singapore football should really look on. Even we still swell with pride in this heroic, unprecedented path towards an Asian Club final by Lion City Sailors.